So we see now that the United States has gone back to war against Iran. Trump even took out to Truth Social and wrote recently that the ceasefire is over. He also made some comments at the NATO summit that Karg Island could be taken by the US. Um, is it too late to save the Memorandum of Understanding now?
I don't think it is too late, but we're definitely reaching the point in which it would be too late. I think it's very noteworthy that the Iranians have not said that the memorandum is over with yet. They're keeping the door open. Trump has said that I think it's over, so he's not been categorical. Because at the end of the day, uh, this latest round of fighting is probably not going to lead anywhere. It's not going to change the fundamentals of the situation. And then there's going to be a need to return to diplomacy. And if the MOU technically is still allied, you save yourself a tremendous amount of time and political capital. If you have to start from scratch, we saw how difficult it was to get to the MOU, and the MOU clearly was imperfect. The ambiguities in it ended up becoming perhaps a little bit too big, particularly Article 5, which is a key reason as to why the fighting is taking place in the Strait right now. So I think it's noteworthy that both sides have not stated anything categorical about abandoning the MOU. The ceasefire could be over with without the MOU being over with. Now, is it good that we're in this situation? Absolutely not. I think this is an absolute disaster. And it bodes very badly for the MOU at the end of the day. This was not the way it was supposed to happen. It was supposed to be a bumpy ride. That was very understandable given the difficulties of this. But this type of a return to fighting that we now seen twice, and the second round is much worse, much more intense than it was in the first, is really not something that does an MOU any justice. And I think it was Ali Hashem that at this point called it not the MOU, but the MOM, the Memorandum of Misunderstanding.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought when Trump referred to going after Karg Island. I mean, this will be an incredible escalation, also sending in
Yeah,
ground troops at all. So this will
yeah.
be very different. But I I also assumed that the US would try to renegotiate the MOU as they went along. Could this be part of the American approach here? That is to use a bit military force in order to try to make the Iranians shift their position, for example, on the administration of the Strait of Hormuz, because I think they were hoping, they can get the ships in and out without falling under the the control of Iran. But again, making it a twofold question for the US to simply go on, if it is an approach to renegotiate this, bombing, going back to ceasefire, going bombing, at some point, the Iranians would reach the conclusion that why would they give this kind of escalation dominance to the United States? Why allow the Americans to decide when the bombing starts and when it stops?
Yeah.
This is a very dangerous control to cede.
Yeah. I frankly am not convinced that this is a thought through renegotiating tactic. Is it an effort to strengthen the US position? Yes. But is it a renegotiation tactic, meaning that they actually know exactly what to do with that additional supposed leverage? No. And let me take one step back, also say, at the end of the day, there was a solution to this issue about the Strait on the table that both sides were converging towards. After the first round of fighting, which is now about 13 or so days ago, there was diplomatic activity and there was an idea that had emerged that said, okay, the Iranians do not want to see any ships go through either the southern or the northern corridor without coordinating with them. That's their read of the MOU, Article 5. The US and most of the GCC do not read the MOU or that article in that manner, that it is solely in the responsibility of Iran. But an idea that emerged that was actually attractive to both sides is that, okay, let's have all ships report to both sides, not just to the Iranians. So there would be a designated country on the GCC side that also would receive all of the notifications of all ships, northern and southern corridor, that would be going through. And as long as that is the case, the Iranians would be fine. In fact, they have been fine with countries going through the southern corridor as long as they report, and the reporting is nothing insurmountable. It's just essentially sending an email saying that they are seeking to transit. It's not, there's no fees, there's nothing of that kind. Now, what happened though is that they never managed to fully come to a conclusion on this. They were on their way, but then because of the funeral of Ayatollah Khamenei, the diplomacy was put on pause. And during that pause, there were several ships, 3 in total, at least one of them Qatari, one of them Saudi, that were trying to go through the southern corridor with their transponders off, which the Iranians viewed as a major provocation. And part of the reason why the Iranians are concerned about this is because, and I write about this extensively on the Substack, is because they fear that the US is trying to use the MOU to create a new solid corridor in the southern part of the strait that would be operational even if war were to resume. Meaning that if full-scale war goes back and the Iranians want to close the strait, they won't be able to do so because of this new corridor that the US Navy is setting up. And this, of course, would be a very detrimental situation for the Iranians because it was their ability to close the strait that gave them significant leverage in the war. And they're fearing that the US is quietly trying to undo that capacity. And I think there's reasons to believe that that is exactly what the US is doing, because that is in the interest of the United States to take away that leverage from the Iranians. So this is why this is a very sensitive point. But had there not been this pause as a result of the funeral and this effort to go through the southern part of the strait during the funeral, and I have to say, on the one hand, you can make an argument of saying that, look, these countries have an ability and a right to go through the southern part of the strait by their reading of the MOU. And you can also say that from the Iranian side, their argument is going to be there's nothing that prevents them from transiting through the strait, whether it's the southern or the northern. It's just that they have to register and turn on their transporters. So, and that's why they view this as a provocation. Why did they not notify their transit? Why did they turn off the transporters? This then caused the Iranians, after several warnings, to shoot at these ships, not in a way to sink them or anything like that, which then led to the US taking military action. I think personally that both sides overreacted. There is an overreaction on the Iranian side in the sense of shooting at the ships. There's probably better ways. And I'm not saying that they're shooting right away. They're sending several warnings, trying to redirect them. But there's nevertheless probably better ways of dealing with this. But I also think it's a massive overreaction by the US to essentially restart the war over this issue. Because at the end of the day, this really doesn't matter that much. This arrangement would only be lasting for roughly 10 more days for the first 30 days of the MOU. And then the final agreement is not determined by the intermediate agreement. So, a lot of things are being sacrificed for a temporary period of 10 days that ultimately doesn't matter that much. So both sides, in my view, are unfortunately not showing the discipline that they should. I think Trump appears to be, I'm not talking to him to know, but just seeing how out of balance he seemed to have been at the NATO summit. I'm sure it's very hard on him to have to spend that time with European leaders who he seems to all despise. No progress on Russia, Ukraine. And then Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio comes into the Oval Office and briefs him on additional Iranian attacks and are pushing him to take military action. And I think it shouldn't be a surprise because neither Hegseth or Rubio appear to have been in favor of the MOU in the first place. I think all of that contributed to what I think at the end of the day is an overreaction and a very counterproductive one.